The News Talk Radio Newsroom and powered by DemeraraWaves.com.
The news comes to you with the compliments of Eureka Medical Laboratories. With the news at this time, I am Deanna Jordan. A very good morning to you. To begin the news, here's a look at the leads. A top U.S. government official is due in Guyana for talks with the government, opposition, and other interest groups. A man has been charged with attempting to murder his wife. In regional news, Antigua and Barbuda police are suggesting that the age limit for driving be increased. Venezuela's opposition wants the United States to link resumption of oil purchases to political concessions. And for the international news, we'll bring to you the latest news bulletin from the BBC World Service. The details will be coming up in just a moment.
A COVID-19 PCR test is now mandatory for many routine activities, including travel and return to work purposes. At Eureka, our trained and experienced staff will ensure confidentiality while your test is conducted in a professional and timely manner, which results in just 48 hours. So the next time you require an efficient and hassle-free PCR COVID-19 test, call 624-8378, 608-8378, or 623-7233 to schedule your appointment. You can also ask about our house call testing service.
And now the news in detail. The United States Deputy Assistant Secretary for Caribbean Affairs and Haiti, Barbara Feinstein, will this week hold wide-ranging talks with the Guyana government, opposition, and civil society. The American Embassy says she will be visiting Guyana from today, March 24th to the 26th. Her agenda includes meetings with Vice President Bart Jagdeo, members of the opposition, the Caribbean community, CARICOM, the private sector, and civil society. Ms. Feinstein's visit comes against the backdrop of frequent calls by American Democratic Congressmen and President Joe Biden for inclusive economic growth for all races and the preservation of democracy. The American Embassy says her visit underscores the continued importance the United States places on the U.S. and Guyanese partnership. The Guyana government is on the verge of licensing a new merchant bank that will target the rapidly emerging large business sector. Vice President Bart Jagdeo first announced the formation of the financial institution at a meeting with residents of Region 2, Pomeroon Supernam. Governor of the Bank of Guyana, Dr. Gobin Ganga, told Demerara Waves Online News that negotiations started about 1 year ago with the principals to set up the new merchant bank here. He said the license was being finalized and the location has been already identified. Dr. Ganga said the Bank of Guyana would be conducting an on-site inspection. Merchant banks seek to mobilize monies to invest in Guyana in various ways for large corporations. Dr. Ganga declined to confirm or deny whether United States-based Guyanese financial analyst Floyd Haynes obtained the license for the merchant bank. Mr. Haynes could not be reached immediately for comment, but well-placed sources in the local financial sector have confirmed that he has gotten the nod to set up the financial institution, second only to Guyana America's Merchant Bank, a subsidiary of the Guyana Bank for Trade and Industry. The central bank governor said a merchant would require an asset requirement of at least $500,000. The opposition, People's National Congress Reform, PNCR, is recommending that all 10 of Guyana's administrative regions have an agricultural program to achieve self-sufficiency. PNCR leader Aubrey Norton made the recommendation in light of rising food prices. He also wants to see the government put in place agro-processing programs. The PNCR says small-scale farming must be encouraged as this will provide jobs and increase food supply. The party says the Rural Agricultural Infrastructure Development RAID program should be revived to assist farmers to return to their lands. Meanwhile, the PNCR is also calling for grants of up to $5 million per business to promote and help micro, small, and medium-sized businesses. The party says this will help new people into farming and other businesses, but also help a wide array of businesses to grow throughout the country. A man who knifed his wife several times during an argument has been charged with attempted murder. Police say 44-year-old Michael Hercules of Central Amelius Ward, Linden, has been remanded to prison until April 3rd. He was charged with the offense of attempting to murder Latoya Hercules on March 20th at Bucktown Christianburg, Wisma, Linden. She was stabbed to her chest, one of her lower limbs and fingers before he abandoned her. Investigators were told that the woman alerted her relatives, who rescued her and took her to the hospital. A man was subsequently arrested. And now in regional news. Two of Suriname's opposition parties are seeking an emergency meeting to discuss severe flooding in the interior and on the coastal plain. Star News reports that the heavy rains for more than 1 week have seen water levels rising and rivers bursting their banks. The National Democratic Party, NDP, and the Brotherhood and Unity, BEP party want the meeting to exchange ideas with the government in order to arrive at a structural and sustainable solution to the flooding problem. The flooding has been worsened by the decision to open all the valves of the Afabacus Reservoir to drain excess water. But Star News reports that as a result, large parts of the interior have been flooded. The NDP and BEP political parties say that although the disaster struck 2 weeks ago, aid has been barely trickling into certain areas and others not received any relief. Vice President Ronnie Brunswick has informed the National Assembly that $6 million Suriname dollars has been made available to support the residents with, among other things, food and clean drinking water. The NDP and BEP, however, say that will not be sufficient. Weather forecasters and disaster response experts predict that other parts of Suriname's coastal plain, including Paramaribo, will be flooded in the coming days. 5 United Kingdom Privy Council judges have reserved their ruling on 2 challenges against the Trinidad and Tobago public health regulations. On Wednesday, at the resumption of the hearing, which began on Monday, the judges said they would take time to consider their judgment in what were important appeals. At Monday's hearing, the judges heard from attorneys representing the state and 5 men who were arrested at a guest house on April 9, 2020, and charged under regulations that limited gatherings to groups of no more than 5 people. On Wednesday, they also heard from the state and attorneys for Pandit Satyanand Maharaj, who challenged the regulations on the basis that the prohibition on gatherings did not apply to religious gatherings and was vague and uncertain as it criminalized breaches of the guidelines for places of worship. In September 2020, then High Court Judge Justice Ronnie Budu Singh dismissed the challenge of Dominic Suraj and the others, while partially upholding Maharaj's challenge involving the regulations over criminal sanctions for breaches related to places of worship. In April 2021, the Trinidad and Tobago Court of Appeal dismissed the appeal of the 5 men, ruling that the regulations passed under the Colonial Age Public Health Ordinance were not unconstitutional. And in Antigua and Barbuda, police there are considering raising the legal driving age from 18 to 21 years. Head of the Antigua and Barbuda Police Force's Traffic Department, Assistant Superintendent Rodney Ellis, made this suggestion in the wake of numerous traffic collisions, sometimes on a daily basis. So far, 4 persons have died on the roads. To date, Superintendent Ellis admits that he was opposed to this suggestion at first, but he now thinks it might be a good idea. He says that speeding plays a major factor in most of these accidents, adding that persons who recently obtained their license should not be speeding. According to Ellis, motorists between the ages of 18 and 25 are the ones involved in the more serious collisions. Meanwhile, Mr. Ellis says the Traffic Department will continue its public education drive on road safety in an attempt to reduce the number of daily collisions. Former Sao Paulo Governor Geraldo Alckmin joined the Brazilian Socialist Party, PSB, on Wednesday, taking the first step to officializing a once unimaginable union with Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva as the leftist running mate in the October election. Alckmin, a center-right political veteran who unsuccessfully ran against current far-right President Jair Bolsonaro in 2018, is expected to lure pro-business centrists to former President Lula's ticket. Lula, whose Workers' Party, PT, governed Brazil from 2003 to 2016, maintains a 13 to 15-point lead in early polls over Bolsonaro. Voters are angry at Bolsonaro's handling of the pandemic, rising inflation, and skyrocketing fuel prices. Those issues have played into Lula's hands and helped sand off the rough edges of his controversial legacy in Brazil. Many there still recoil at years of PT corruption, as well as bribery charges that put Lula in jail until they were annulled. Addressing a cheering crowd at a PSB event in Brasilia, Alckmin heaped praise on his former rival. Alckmin said a re-elected Lula would reduce social differences and have grown on the Bolsonaro and recover Brazil's prestige on the world stage. Lula's political alliance with Alckmin represents a stunning about-face by the 2 men who ran off against each other in 2006 election, in which Lula was re-elected. During a TV debate at the time, Alckmin said Lula's government only had 2 gears: stick with the economy or accelerating in terms of scandals. But Bolsonaro's political vulnerability appears to have chilled relations between Alckmin and Lula, opening up a path for a marriage of convenience. Venezuela's opposition is pressing the United States to condition any easing of oil sanctions on political concessions. Reuters news agency says this is according to 3 persons who are involved in the matter. This adds new hurdles to oil companies hoping to resume operations there. The opposition, led by Juan Guaido, has been sidelined in high-level talks between the United States and Venezuela. U.S. diplomats have sought to find energy supplies worldwide that can help replace Russian oil and gas as buyers steer clear of Russia's imports over its invasion of Ukraine. U.S. officials met Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro in Caracas for the first bilateral talks in years earlier this month. The Venezuelan opposition request adds to the issues temporarily thwarting efforts by oil firms to win U.S. approvals to get access to the country's crude for unpaid debts. If accepted, the opposition's proposal will pause any consideration of U.S. imports of Venezuelan oil. Furor created by the diplomats' visit to Caracas has effectively chilled hopes for several oil companies to win U.S. approvals that would help them trade Venezuelan oil cargoes for billions of dollars in past debts. The opposition's stance, laid out in recent meetings with U.S. State Department officials and opposition leader Juan Guaido's envoys, undercuts a faction within President Joe Biden's administration seeking a new policy toward the country with the world's largest crude reserves. And now for the international news, here's the latest bulletin from the BBC World Service.
Hello, I'm Neil Nunes with the BBC News. NATO leaders are meeting in Brussels to consider the next steps in their response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The two-day meeting has been described as one of the most important in the history of the alliance as the war enters its second month. Speaking to reporters on his arrival, Poland's President Andrzej Duda said the alliance needed to take determined action.
It's
a matter of sitting down at one table and considering what actions we should take to actually end Russian aggression and withdraw Russian forces from Ukraine. In short, to end the war, and above all, to stop people dying. That's our fundamental task today as the Euro-Atlantic community. It must be done with the maximum possible peaceful means, but very effectively and decisively.
The emergency meeting will approve the deployment of thousands more troops to Eastern Europe to bolster NATO's eastern flank. The Ukrainian Navy says it's destroyed a Russian landing craft to the west of the besieged city of Mariupol. If confirmed, this would be another setback to Russia's drive to establish a land corridor between the occupied territories of Crimea and the Donbass. Sasha Slichter reports.
Pictures on social media show a massive explosion above a huge warship anchored off the occupied port of Berdyansk on the Azov Sea, 80 kilometers west of Mariupol. According to unverified reports, 2 more ships are on fire. On Monday, with much fanfare, Russia's defense ministry announced the docking there of a large, beachable landing support ship. It said the Orsk was one of 10 ships to supply the southern flank, which has seen the fiercest fighting in the war so far. Each landing craft can carry 20 tanks or 40 armoured personnel carriers and also 400 Marines.
Fighting has also continued elsewhere in Ukraine. The center of the second city, Kharkiv, has again come under fire by missiles launched from Russian ships in the Black Sea. Earlier, in its latest assessment of the fighting, the U.S. military said Russian troops had been pushed into defensive positions around Kyiv. According to the Pentagon, they've been forced back 50 kilometers from the east of the capital. Our correspondent James Waterhouse has more now from Kyiv.
It's been a month since Russian forces moved in from the north, east and south. Instead of the quick toppling of Kyiv many predicted, the UK's Ministry of Defence says invading troops are having considerable supply and morale issues in the northeast, where Ukrainians are also carrying out successful counterattacks. It's thought they could be able to encircle Russian troops in the towns of Irpin and Bucha. Bombs are continuing to fall on cities around the country, including Chernihiv and Kharkiv, where the mayor claims 1,000 homes have been destroyed.
World News from the BBC. South Korea says North Korea has test-fired an intercontinental ballistic missile for the first time since 2017. More details from Laura Bicker.
This is a big missile. It flew for more than an hour and splashed down just 170 kilometres from Japan's coastline. Officials in Tokyo said the launch appeared to be a new type of intercontinental ballistic missile. This may be North Korea's first launch of an ICBM since November 2017. South Korea's military said it fired a total of 5 missiles in response from the ground, the sea and the air. This is a major escalation on the Korean peninsula after months of weapons tests by Pyongyang, 12 missile launches in total. The world's attention has been elsewhere, and the Biden administration has not made North Korea a priority.
Australia has accepted an offer from New Zealand to take in 450 asylum seekers 9 years after the offer was first made. Canberra was reluctant to agree to the deal because it believed the refugees could eventually end up in Australia. Queen Elizabeth's grandson, Prince William, has expressed his profound sorrow about slavery in a speech in Jamaica. He said slavery was abhorrent and should never have happened. Earlier, the Prime Minister, Andrew Holness, told Prince William and his wife Catherine that he wanted Jamaica to become a republic. Currently, the Queen is head of state there.
But Jamaica is, as you would see, a country that is very proud of our history, very proud of what we have achieved. And we are moving on. And we intend to attain and fulfill our true ambitions and destiny as an independent, developed, prosperous.
Andrew Holness, that's the latest BBC World News.
The news was brought to you with the compliments of Eureka Medical Laboratories.
Don't let the fear of contracting the coronavirus disease deter you from seeking the medical care you need. At Eureka Labs, we ensure the safety of our clients and staff with our rigid sanitization routine. This involves the use of ultraviolet lights to effectively rid the air and all surfaces of viruses and bacteria that may be present throughout the lab daily. The light works to rapidly inactivate microorganisms through a physical process that is invisible to human eye. So the next time you need a checkup, don't hesitate to give us a call on 225-7574 to schedule your appointment.
Here now is a recap of the leads. A top U.S. government official is due in Guyana for talks with the government, opposition, and other interest groups. A man has been charged with attempting to murder his wife. In regional news, Antigua and Barbuda police are suggesting that the age limit for driving be increased. And Venezuela's opposition wants the United States to link resumption of oil purchases to political concessions. And that's the end of the news.
This has been the news, compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom. For ongoing updates, visit demerarawaves.com, and you can check facebook.com/demwaves and twitter.com/demwaves.